Two boys went fishing in a quiet Ohio village. It could be where I sit right now, unaware that they were about to face something unimaginable. A creature that was part snake, part nightmare, emerged right from the woods. And while attacking and dragging one of the boys to this ancient tree, what they saw that day was no legend. And it's a story you will never forget. But that was only the beginning. You see, it was a day like any other day in the small, sleepy village of Crosswick, Ohio. The sun hung high in the sky, casting its golden light over the quiet town. But that tranquility would soon be shattered by an event so terrifying it would echo through history for generations to come. The date was May 1st, 1882, and two young boys, 13-year-old Ed Lynch and his younger brother Joe, who was 11, had decided to spend their afternoon fishing by a creek, just a short walk from their home. And fishing was a pastime the two boys enjoyed doing. Without modern distractions nowadays like television or video games, it was the perfect way to pass time and soak in the fresh air. But they had no idea that on that particular day, their peaceful afternoon would become something straight out of a nightmare. So as the boys sat quietly by the water, they all of a sudden heard this strange rustling in the brush right behind them. And at first, they thought it might be this small animal, a rabbit, or maybe a raccoon. But the sound then grew louder and more deliberate. And then the ground beneath them trembled ever so slightly, almost like an earthquake. And that's when they heard this low, guttural hiss. Clearly, the boys exchanged nervous glances, but had really no time to react, because suddenly from the underbrush emerged a creature unlike anything they had ever seen. Towering over them was this monster, was about 40 feet long and over 12 feet high, with a thick, snake-like body covered in these glistening scales. But the beast had glowing eyes, and its mouth was filled with these rows of razor-sharp teeth. And before they could fully comprehend what was actually going on and what they were seeing, the creature lunged at Joe. And its muscular body twisted through the air with a speed that just defied its massive size. And in an instant, it wrapped itself around Joe, lifting him off the ground just as if he was a rag doll. So Ed screamed, and without knowing really what to do, he grabbed a stick from nearby, but his attempts to beat the creature did nothing, and the blows of the stick just bounced harmlessly off its impenetrable scales. And that's when the beast dragged Joe toward a massive sycamore tree, its enormous trunk looming like a sentinel over the forest. And it was clear that the creature intended to take Joe into the hollow base of that tree. This is when Joe screamed for help, but his voice was so weak as he was desperate as the monster's grip just kept getting tighter and tighter. And in a stroke of sheer luck, Ed, on the other hand, was able to kind of break free from this paralysis of fear that he had, and all of a sudden he started bolting towards the village. His heart was pounding so fast as he just ran faster than he ever thought possible, and his only thought was to go get help. I gotta get help. So he bursted into town square and he frantically shouted for anyone who would listen. And soon a group of men armed with rifles, axes, and pitchforks gathered, and they followed Ed back to the sycamore tree. And of course they were hesitant of his story, but they followed anyway. And what they found there defied explanation. The ground around the tree had been disturbed, as if a huge, large animal had rampaged through the brush. But then, they saw it. A massive, gaping crevice at the base of the tree, disappearing literally into the earth. So the men kind of just, approached it cautiously. At this point, the air was thick with tension. But suddenly, the earth started trembling again. And from the shadows of that crevice emerged the creature, its snake-like body glistening in the fading light. But this time, it stood upright on 4 legs. Yes, 4 legs which seemed to have sprouted from nowhere like it was also half lizard. So the monster, towering over 12 feet tall, let out this blood-curdling hiss that sent several of the men stumbling back in terror. And that's when the rest of the men fired off all their rifles. But the bullets bounced off the creature's thick scales like nothing. It was clear that no weapon they had could kill this beast. So at this point, realizing that they are completely outmatched, the men shifted their focus on the sycamore tree itself. I mean, if they couldn't kill the monster, maybe they could trap it or force it to flee by cutting down the tree that it called home. So with axes in hand, they began hacking and hacking away at this massive trunk. And the creature could sense the danger, so it lunged at them. But this time the men were ready. They used axes and long sticks to, kind of keep the beast at bay as they continued their desperate assault on the tree. Finally, with one last crackling groan, the sycamore tree began to topple. And that's when the creature let out this ear-piercing screech. Its body looked like it was writhing in pain as it retreated into the depths of the earth. And that's when the tree fell with a thunderous crash. And for a moment, it was all silent. The men stood there frozen, unsure if the creature would return. But it didn't. This is where the story becomes even more bizarre. Because days later, the town would learn that this wasn't the first time a creature of this size had been spotted. You see, the local papers there reported that for years there had been these strange sightings of this large tracks in the dust crossing the pike just north of town. And people, of course, dismissed it at first. Who could believe that a creature of such monstrous proportions could exist? But as word of the Crosswick monster spread and more details emerged, the creature was described as being 30 to 40 feet long, with legs about 4 feet in length and a body covered in black and white scales with yellow spots. Its head was said to be about 16 inches wide, with a black forked tongue and a mouth that was blood red inside. Witnesses claimed that this beast moved with the speeds of a racehorse, using its tail for propulsion as it just reared up on its legs. And don't worry, because in the aftermath of this attack, young Joe Lynch was left there in a state of shock but alive. According to Dr. Elsie Lukens, the boy was badly bruised and scratched, and he laid there in convulsions and spasms throughout the night. And he frequently woke up in terror, haunted by the memory of the creature that had nearly dragged him to death itself. And though the doctor assured the family that Joe would physically recover, the psychological scars were much deeper, as you can pretty much imagine. If you saw this thing in real life and it was real, you could imagine. And the town of Crosswick would never be the same. While some obviously dismiss this story because some people, have to see it to believe it, which I get it, but others believe that something truly terrifying had happened that day. And after this, expeditions were launched to explore that cave beneath the fallen sycamore. But no one has ever found conclusive evidence of that monster. So over 120 years later, it became legend, passed down through generations, each telling more frightening than the last. But for those who had been there, the men who had saw the creature with their own eyes, and young Joe, who had felt its cold, slimy grip, there was no doubt that it was real. The Crosswick monster was no legend. It was a horrifying reality that would haunt them for the rest of their lives. Now, this was for all my supernatural fans out there. I hope you really enjoyed this. And if you did, then make sure to check out this story right here. It's about an island where, let's just say, crazy things happen. UFOs, exploding stoves. Check it out right now. That's all I got for you guys today. I'll see you next time. Cheers.